How do we know what books to read? I mean, sure, we've got recommendations like this wonderful account that you're watching right now. You've got book reviewers and newspapers. You've got your friendly bookseller and your bookstore and so on. But one of the great resources that we have to wade through the massive volume of annual publications are book prizes. And today I want to talk about book prizes because they're a pretty essential part of the landscape, but they have their controversy and they've evolved in numerous ways throughout history. Why do we have book prizes? I mean, I use them because there's an insane volume of books being published every year. I think the figure for the UK is there's more than 100,000 books published every year. So how am I going to wade through all of that? And for me, book prizes represent a sort of quite clear beacon of where there is quality, something of a shortcut to get there. There are lots of prizes around the world, so I'm not going to cover them all today, but I do want to talk about kind of the most salient ones, the most famous prizes that we all know and follow, and to give you guys a sense of what those prizes represent and how I think that they think about books and how they approach rewarding books with great reputations through those prizes. All these different prizes, they come with their own biases, with their own tastes, their own preferences, their own mandates. Some book prizes reward nonfiction. Some book prizes reward books by women or plays or anything else. So there's a lot of prizes. But again, I want to focus on just a few today. Obviously, we know when we think about the Oscars, like film prizes, there's a lot of campaigning, a lot of PR, and it's not 100% clear that the winner represents the best outcome. I think book prizes, even though there are many of them and all have their different approaches, there is a bit of that, but less so. So we're in pretty good hands. But there are biases, obviously. I mean, if you look at winners of book prizes in the 1950s and 60s, obviously it was a lot of white guys, and there weren't a lot of women, and there weren't a lot of people of color. That has now changed for the better, and I think most prizes, if not all, have rectified that to allow a pretty representative view of authors and society at large. Book prizes can be seen as being a little bit elitist. I think that's a fair accusation. And there, I want to kind of balance two opposing points of view. On the one hand, I think that book prize committees, the juries of book prizes, should be composed of quote unquote experts or people that we look at with high regard and whose opinions we do really respect. And the more prestigious and impressive a prize, the more we do want to believe that the people making these decisions are of a high level. And so I'm going to say something a little controversial, but for example, in this year's Booker Prize, there was Sarah Jessica Parker, best known as Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City and the later terrible sequels of that show, as one of the jurors. And to me, that felt a bit like a publicity grab. Like, oh, let's get somebody who gets a lot of recognition. Now, a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but Sarah Jessica Parker, she does publishing, she has an imprint and everything. Yeah, okay, Sarah Jessica Parker does publishing like Reese Witherspoon does publishing. It doesn't really advance the intellectual causes of publishing. I'm very grateful for her to advance a certain type of publishing, but the Booker Prize is a more august, venerated prize, and I think we should look for jurors to represent that. Having said that, just because the Booker Prize deems a certain book great doesn't mean that you have to believe that it's great. You can totally disagree with that opinion. You can totally think that a Booker Prize winner is boring or uninteresting, or you don't have to believe that those experts should dictate to you your opinions. So what I've just said might sound a bit contradictory, but to me it makes sense. I do think that these prizes should be decided and presented by people who have some real knowledge and expertise around them. But I also believe that you as a reader are absolutely free to disagree with their choices and to form your own opinions around the books that those juries select. So bit of a balance there, right there. So let's get started on some of the prizes and have a look at how they think and how they approach things. I think let's begin with the greatest prize of them all, the one that all writers dream of at night, and that is the Nobel Prize for Literature. And that was founded in the early 1900s by Alfred Nobel, who was a Swedish inventor. He famously invented dynamite. And with the money that he made from this pretty nefarious invention, he endowed the Nobel Prize. And one of the categories of Nobel Prize is literature. And actually, I've got to say that if I look back at the Nobel Prize for Literature, which rewards any writer, could be a novelist, could be a nonfiction writer, could be a poet, a playwright, could be even a singer-songwriter like Bob Dylan, whom they chose in 2016. But they have a really broad view around the world, around different forms of literature. And I have to say they've done a pretty good job. Yes, in the past, it was a lot of white guys, but they were trying to differentiate between different nationalities, and in the past, they have diversified their point of view a lot. The Nobel Prize, when it comes out, can sometimes seem a little esoteric, a little bit weird, sure. But in hindsight, you can see that actually they did pick a lot of very worthy winners who were quite transformative internationally, and who did, incredible innovations in international literature. But they have missed out on some big names. I mean, most notably, I think Philip Roth was one of the biggest names, one of the biggest authors who spent, the last couple of decades of his life waiting for a Nobel Prize that never came. The Nobel does like to reward people that are somewhat unexpected. But again, in hindsight, you see that they were deserving. So it's quite a neat trick that they pull out. Maybe there's a halo effect that as soon as somebody gets the Nobel, you think to yourself, oh yeah, wow, that person really deserved it. But there are a few people that, were a bit weird in terms of being selected. I'm thinking of the Swedish poet Thomas Tranströmer, who won, about a decade ago. That was a bit odd. The Italian playwright Dario Fo, but that was a little bit left field. So there have been some like that as well. But in general, I like the Nobel Prize. I think it's a sign of great quality, and it ages generally very well. Let's move on to the Booker Prize, and that is a British prize for fiction. And up until 10 years ago, it was only for British authors. 10 years ago, they changed the rules to include any book written in the English language, whatever the nationality of the writer. That's probably a healthier approach, and it probably gave the prize a more international dimension and more international visibility. So that was probably a good step forward. The Booker is really seen as a very respected prize. I mean, it's a heavy hitter. If you win the Booker, you are going down in literary history because you have kind of made it. I remember seeing one of the recent winners of the Booker Prize, Bernardine Evaristo, who won in 2019 for Girl, Woman, Other. I remember seeing her speak, and she said, after I won the Booker, everyone started their sentences when meeting me saying, "It is such an honor." And she was like, was it not an honor before I won the Booker? So it really creates a sort of persona around the writer, rightly or wrongly. I find the Booker is a sign of good quality. There have been misses. I guess Prophet Song by Paul Lynch recently wasn't quite my cup of tea. Recent Booker Prize winners that I have liked were Orbital by Samantha Harvey. That was absolutely beautiful. But there have been some phenomenal winners. I'm thinking of The Promise by Damon Galgut, the one in 2021. Phenomenal novel. And in fact, I interviewed that author for my podcast. That was a great interview. You should check it out. The link is in the bio. And then there have been some misses. There was that Sri Lankan novel, The Seven Moons. I forget the title, which was a little bit supernatural fluff. Didn't love it all that much. But so, yeah, there are ups and downs, but the Booker is still a great gauge of quality. There's a brother prize, sister prize of the Booker called the International Booker Prize, and that is given for any book that is translated into English. And the prize goes to both the author and the translator, so it's a pretty good reward system. That prize I have found more irritating and problematic in the past. There was a lot of prizes given to books that frankly were a little bit Orientalist and exotic. So there was a lot of magic and wizardry because brown people are mystical, and I was like, can't there just be an International Booker Prize winner about a guy who goes to work in his car in the morning? Like, does there always need to be some sort of supernatural fluff about it? That kind of irritated me a little bit. The other thing is, if it's not super mystical, it's overly lyrical, so just a little bit too poetic and dense. And I'm thinking of the book Kairos by the German author Jenny Erpenbeck, which is about a very unhealthy romantic sexual relationship that frankly was not convincing at all. But there was also that fantastic book, Time Shelter by Georgi Gospodinov, the Bulgarian writer. That was amazing. And in fact, I interviewed the translator for that book, Angela Rodel, who won that prize for my podcast. The link for that is also in the bio. You should check it out. It was a great interview about translation. So it's up and down, but there is some worthy winners to check out. The next prize I might mention is one from my home country in France, which is the Prix Goncourt. This is one of the most prestigious, the most prestigious award in France. It's like the French Booker Prize. And that has a pretty consistent track record. Proust won it back in the day, and numerous authors who have done incredible things. The Goncourt was also, I think, quite early in picking out new evolutions in literature, and has often been seen as a bit of a feeder for the Nobel, actually. It has kind of been quite prescient and prophetic in that sense. The Goncourt recently has had a pretty consistent track record. I think last year I didn't particularly love it. I don't think I read it. Last 2 years have been a bit off, but this year's winner, La Maison Vide by Laurent Mauvignier, was fantastic. Absolute phenomenal winner. And broadly, the Goncourt jurors have good taste and do a good job. But at times they get it wrong, as we all do. And then finally in America, you've got a lot of prizes, but one that I would focus on would be the Pulitzer Prize, which rewards a number of different categories, including nonfiction, fiction, plays, poetry, and so on. The Pulitzer Prize is the one, in my opinion, but don't take it to the bank, in my opinion, smells the most like there is a lot of marketing campaign behind it, a lot of PR behind it, but that's just my opinion. I don't have anything to back it up with, but there's just a lot more at stake. Like in the American book market, if you've got Pulitzer Prize winner on your cover, you know you're going to sell more, and so you know that there's going to be a lot more campaigning, and who knows if the outcomes are always the best ones. I also feel, and again, this is a bit controv, that the Pulitzer is the one that feels the most woke and the most kind of attuned to quite intense contemporary themes. Maybe that's a good thing. But sometimes I look at the Pulitzer Prize, I'm like, guys, can we just have a novel that is not on the intensity of the current context, and something that relates to other themes. You don't have to always be wallowing in the immediate context of society. But that's, again, just my opinion, and you're absolutely free to disagree with it. So that's, for me, kind of how I view these different prizes. I do try and keep abreast of them, because all of the prizes I've just outlined, despite their flaws, despite my criticisms of them, remain great beacons of taste and quality in a sea or an ocean of publications every year. It's very difficult to wade through what's good, and these are a good way to see what's working out well, what's good in the landscape. So anyway, I'd love to hear from any of you what your thoughts are on book prizes. I've said a few things that a lot of you may push back against and argue against, and I would welcome that in the comments. Feel free to comment. Or let me know, maybe there are some book prizes I should have mentioned and haven't. All around the world, there are fantastic book prizes. I just wanted to cover the main ones that I follow, but that's quite a narrow point of view, and so you might have some better ones that you would recommend. Please share that in the comments. And any other suggestions or thoughts you might have, please feel free to share. Lit with Charles is present across the internet. You can find my accounts on Instagram or Spotify or on Substack. And there's always great content everywhere. So please don't hesitate to follow if you've enjoyed this content, and tell your friends and family. In the meantime, keep reading. Thanks a lot. Bye.